They called it the Final Decree. 700 civilizations, representing over 14 trillion beings across the Milky Way, had voted unanimously for the first time in galactic history. The target? A small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system inhabited by a species that had barely learned to split the atom. Humanity was to be eradicated, not conquered, not enslaved, completely wiped from existence. The Galactic Council had never been wrong about a species' threat level. Their predictive algorithms, refined over millions of years, could calculate a civilization's potential with 99.97% accuracy. When they looked at Earth, the numbers were terrifying. Humans, they concluded, would become the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. But there was something the Council's algorithms couldn't account for. Something that would turn their perfect plan into the galaxy's greatest nightmare. They had never encountered a species that, when faced with impossible odds and certain death, would simply refuse to die. This is the story of how humanity didn't just survive the galaxy's judgment. This is the story of how Earth taught the universe what true terror looks like when you corner the wrong species. The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chamber stretched endlessly into the void, their translucent walls reflecting the light of 1,000 different suns. Today, representatives from every corner of the Milky Way had gathered for what historians would later call the Great Miscalculation. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vraxian Empire adjusted his breathing apparatus as he watched the final votes tally on the massive holographic display. His species had dominated their home sector for over 50,000 years, and in all that time, he had never seen such unanimous agreement. 700 civilizations, 14 trillion beings. One voice. The small blue planet rotating slowly in the center of the chamber would be cleansed. The motion passes, announced High Counselor Yithran, her voice carrying across the chamber through translation matrices that converted her crystalline tones into the native languages of every species present. By unanimous decree of the Galactic Council, the species known as humans of the planet designated Earth, Sol, 3 poses an existential threat to galactic stability and must be eliminated. Murmurs of satisfaction rippled through the assembled delegates. The Kethmori clicked their mandibles in approval, while the gas-form ethereals shimmered with what their species considered contentment. Even the usually neutral Silicon Collective had voted for destruction, their quantum cores humming in agreement. Ambassador Zethkar found the unanimity troubling, though he couldn't quite identify why. In his long career, he had seen the Council vote for the subjugation of rebellious species, the quarantine of dangerous worlds, even the occasional relocation of entire populations. But complete extinction? That was reserved for plagues, for species that posed biological or technological threats of the highest order. The humans possessed neither. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. They had barely mastered nuclear fusion, and their fastest ships couldn't even reach their nearest stellar neighbor. Their weapons were crude chemical and nuclear devices that couldn't scratch the shield of the most basic Council patrol craft. By all measurable standards, they were centuries away from being even a minor concern. Yet the probability engines had spoken with absolute certainty. "You seem troubled, Ambassador," came a synthetic voice beside him. Zethkar turned to see Constructor Prime Vexthul, a robotic entity whose consciousness had been uploaded into a mechanical body some 3 million years ago. The machine's optical sensors glowed with curiosity. "The humans are primitive," Zethkar replied, keeping his voice low. "Their most advanced weapons couldn't penetrate a civilian transport's shields. Why does the Council fear them so greatly?" Vexthul's head tilted with mechanical precision. "You question the probability engines? Those same algorithms have guided the Council's decisions for 12 million years. They have never been wrong about a species' potential threat level. Never wrong about species that had actually developed threatening technology," Zethkar corrected. "These humans have barely left their home world. A few dozen individuals have set foot on their satellite. They still burn fossil fuels for energy. What could they possibly do to threaten civilizations that have existed since before their star formed?" The machine's optical array focused on the slowly rotating image of Earth. "The engines do not merely calculate current capability, Ambassador. They extrapolate evolutionary potential, psychological profiles, adaptive capacity, and countless other variables. The calculations regarding humanity were unprecedented." "In what way?" Vexthul paused, accessing databanks that contained the detailed reports from the various survey missions to Earth. "Their aggression index rates at 9.7 out of 10. Their adaptability scores broke the previous maximum threshold. But most concerning is their response to existential threats. The machine turned its full attention to Zethkar. When faced with extinction-level scenarios, 99.8% of all studied species either surrender, flee, or fall into despair. Humans have faced 17 separate extinction-level events in their recent history: natural disasters, resource depletion, disease outbreaks. Their response has been consistent across all 17 scenarios. Which was? They dig in deeper. They fight harder. They become more dangerous when cornered than when comfortable. The engines project that if left unchecked, humans will not only eventually match but exceed the technological capabilities of every species in this chamber. More troubling still, they will do so while maintaining their aggressive, expansionist psychology. Zethkar felt a chill run through his environmental suit. Surely that's theoretical speculation. The engines calculated a 97.3% probability that within 5,000 years, humanity would pose an existential threat to galactic civilization as we know it. No species in recorded history has ever scored above 23% on a long-term threat assessment. As if summoned by their conversation, High Counselor Yithran activated the chamber's central display. The image of Earth dissolved, replaced by detailed projections and data streams. "Distinguished delegates," the High Counselor began, "before we finalize the implementation of our decree, I believe it prudent to review the evidence that necessitated this unprecedented action." The first hologram showed human history, compressed into a timeline that spanned the last 10,000 years. Wars, conquests, technological explosions, and population booms flashed by in rapid succession. "Observe their rate of technological advancement," Yithran continued. "In a mere century, they progressed from muscle-powered transportation to nuclear-powered vessels capable of interplanetary travel. In 50 years, they went from basic computation to artificial intelligence systems approaching sentience." The timeline zoomed in on the most recent centuries. Their population growth is exponential and unsustainable, yet they continue to expand into new environments. Ocean depths, Arctic wastes, underground caverns, they colonize ecosystems that other species flee from. A new set of images appeared, showing human conflicts throughout history. The delegates watched in fascination and horror as humans developed increasingly sophisticated ways to kill other humans. Their warfare evolution is particularly concerning, the High Counselor noted. Unlike species that develop technology for exploration or comfort, humans consistently weaponize every advancement. They discovered fire and immediately created flame weapons. They learned metallurgy and forged swords. They mastered chemistry and created explosives. They split the atom and built world-ending bombs. Constructor Prime Vextol leaned forward in his seat. Most telling is their response to their own weapons of mass destruction. Rather than abandoning such dangerous technology, they built safeguards and created more powerful versions. The hologram shifted to show recent human activities. Space stations orbited Earth while robotic probes explored distant planets. Currently, they are developing technologies that could make them capable of interstellar travel within the next 500 years, Yithran announced. The probability engines calculate that once they achieve faster-than-light capability, their expansion will be rapid, aggressive, and ultimately unstoppable. Ambassador Krelthis of the Aquatic Coalition raised a tentacled appendage. "High Counselor, their current military capabilities are negligible. Could we not simply monitor them and intervene if they actually become threatening?" "A reasonable question," Yithran replied. "However, the engines have modeled this scenario extensively. Any attempted intervention after they achieve interstellar capability has a 89% probability of accelerating their technological development through reverse engineering captured technology. Historically, humans advance fastest when presented with superior technology to study and overcome." She gestured, and new images appeared showing human battles against overwhelming odds. Furthermore, analysis of their combat psychology reveals disturbing patterns. When faced with technologically superior opponents, they do not surrender. They adapt, learn, and continue fighting until either they achieve victory or are completely exterminated. Ambassador Zethkar stood slowly. "High Counselor, if I may offer an alternative perspective." "Proceed, Ambassador." "The scenario you describe, a species that becomes more dangerous when threatened, suggests that attempting to exterminate them might be precisely the action most likely to accelerate their development into the threat we fear." A hush fell over the chamber. For several long moments, no one spoke. Then High Counselor Yithran's crystal form flickered with what her species expressed as amusement. "An interesting philosophical point, Ambassador. However, the engines have accounted for this possibility as well. They calculate that immediate, overwhelming extinction-level action has a 99.1% success probability if executed within the next solar cycle. She activated another display showing the proposed operation. The plan is comprehensive. 3 full battle fleets will converge on the Sol system. Planetary bombardment will begin with their satellite and space installations, followed by systematic sterilization of the planetary surface. Total elimination is projected to require less than 1 planetary rotation. The chamber erupted in approving sounds from various species. To them it seemed elegantly simple, quick, efficient, decisive. Ambassador Zethkar remained standing. And what of the 0.9% probability of failure? High Counselor Yithran's form flickered again. The margin of error accounts primarily for equipment malfunction or communication delays. The possibility of human resistance affecting the outcome is statistically negligible. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out to prepare for humanity's final day, Constructor Prime Vexthal approached Zethkar. Your concerns do you credit, Ambassador, the machine said. However, you must understand the mathematics involved. Even if we are wrong about their long-term potential, which the engines assure us we are not, the cost of being wrong about letting them live is the potential extinction of every species in this galaxy. Zethkar nodded slowly. And what if we are wrong about the cost of trying to kill them? Vexthal's optical array dimmed momentarily. Then we will have learned something new about the universe. But the engines calculate that scenario as so improbable as to be effectively impossible. 3 days later, as the greatest armada in galactic history began its journey toward a small yellow star called Sol, Constructor Prime Vexthal would remember those words. The machine consciousness, with its perfect digital memory, would replay that conversation obsessively in the dark years that followed. The engines had been wrong before, it turned out. They had simply never been wrong about something that could fight back. On Earth, completely unaware that their destruction had been decreed by species they had never heard of, humans continued their daily lives. They went to work, raised families, dreamed of the future, and slowly, incrementally, continued doing what they had always done when faced with challenges. They adapted. They learned. They prepared for threats they couldn't yet imagine. In the deep space monitoring stations that watched for asteroid impacts and solar flares, the first anomalous readings began appearing on screens. Gravitational disturbances consistent with large mass objects dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The technicians logged the readings and flagged them for analysis. After all, space was vast and full of mysteries. What were the odds that those readings represented something heading directly for Earth? Dr. Ryu? Elena Vasquez, working the night shift at the Arecibo Observatory, stared at the readings with growing concern. The gravitational signatures were too regular, too organized to be natural phenomena. She had seen enough computer models to recognize what she was looking at. It was a fleet. A very large fleet. And it was approaching the outer edges of the solar system. Elena reached for her encrypted communication device, her hands trembling slightly as she realized she was about to make the phone call that would change everything. Not just for humanity, but for the galaxy itself. The species that had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and countless wars was about to receive its greatest challenge yet. The universe was about to learn what happened when you threatened the one species that had never learned how to give up. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been monitoring deep space signals for 12 years, but she had never seen anything like the readings cascading across her screens. The gravitational distortions were massive, organized, and getting stronger by the hour. She rubbed her tired eyes and ran the calculations again, hoping she had made an error. She hadn't. The coffee in her mug had gone cold hours ago, but Elena barely noticed as she cross-referenced the data with every natural phenomenon in the astronomical databases. Solar wind variations, asteroid formations, gravitational lensing effects. Nothing matched what she was seeing. The pattern was too perfect, too symmetrical. Whatever was causing these distortions was artificial, and it was heading directly toward Earth at a significant fraction of light speed. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the red phone mounted on her workstation. The direct line to NORAD had been installed after the Chelyabinsk meteor event, when the world realized how unprepared humanity was for threats from space. She had never actually used it. The phone rang twice before a crisp military voice answered. NORAD Space Command. Colonel Martinez speaking. Colonel, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez at Arecibo. I need to report anomalous readings that suggest incoming artificial objects, multiple large-scale signatures, ETA approximately 72 hours. There was a pause. Dr. Vasquez, Can you clarify what you mean by artificial objects? Elena stared at her screens, where the gravitational readings showed a formation that could only be described as a fleet. Colonel, I'm looking at what appears to be approximately 300 objects, each roughly the size of a city, traveling in perfect formation toward our solar system. Hold the line, Doctor. Elena could be her muffled conversations and the rapid clicking of keyboards in the background. After several minutes, Colonel Martinez returned. Dr. Vasquez, we're confirming similar readings from our deep space monitoring systems. Can you maintain observation and provide regular updates? Of course, but Colonel, these aren't meteors or natural phenomena. The formation is too organized and the objects are too large to be anything we've seen before. I think we need to consider the possibility that we're dealing with something intelligent. Another pause. Longer this time. Understood, Doctor. Continue monitoring. We're escalating this to the highest levels. As Elena hung up the phone, she realized she had just made the call that would change everything. But she had no idea how right she was, or how quickly the world would transform around her. Within 6 hours, every major observatory on Earth was tracking the incoming formation. The James Webb Space Telescope, hastily redirected from its deep space observations, captured the first actual images of the objects. The photos arrived at NASA headquarters at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time, where Dr. Sarah Chen, the Director of Planetary Defense, stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The objects weren't asteroids or comets. They were clearly artificial constructs, dark against the starfield, with geometric patterns that screamed of intelligent design. "Get me the president," she said to her assistant, her voice barely above a whisper. By 8 a.m., the President of the United States was in an emergency video conference with the leaders of every major nation on Earth. The Chinese premier looked pale on the secure feed, while the Russian president sat stone-faced as the initial reports were shared. "Ladies and gentlemen," the president began, "I've called this emergency session because humanity appears to be facing an unprecedented situation. Dr. Chen, please brief our colleagues on what we're observing." Dr. Chen shared her screen, displaying the telescope images. "As of this morning, we have confirmed visual contact with approximately 300 artificial objects approaching our solar system. Each object appears to be between 5 and 10 kilometers in length, constructed with materials we cannot identify from this distance." The British Prime Minister leaned forward. "Dr. Chen, when you say artificial, are we discussing the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence? Man, at this point, that's the only explanation that fits the evidence. The objects are maintaining perfect formation, traveling at roughly 30% of light speed, and appear to be decelerating as they approach our outer solar system." The room fell silent. Finally, the German Chancellor spoke up. "What are their projected intentions?" Dr. Chen exchanged glances with the President before answering. "Based on their trajectory and deceleration pattern, they will arrive at Earth's orbital distance in approximately 68 hours. Their approach vector suggests, well, it suggests they're coming here specifically." The French president rubbed his temples. "Are we certain they represent a threat? We have no information about their intentions." Dr. Chen replied carefully. "However, the sheer scale of this fleet suggests a level of technological capability far beyond anything we possess. What the world leaders didn't know, what Elena Vasquez and her colleagues couldn't possibly have detected, was that the alien fleet had already been monitoring human communications for the past 6 hours. The translation matrices aboard the lead vessel had been recording and analyzing every electromagnetic transmission from Earth. Commander Thackrell of the Vraxian fleet reviewed the intercepted communications with growing unease. As a career military officer, he had participated in dozens of planetary pacification operations, but never one quite like this. "Status report," he demanded as he entered the main command center of his flagship, the Unrelenting Judgment. "Sir, we have achieved successful interception of the target species communication networks," reported his intelligence officer, a young Vraxian named Veltar. "Their primitive electromagnetic transmissions are easily decoded."
"What are they discussing?"
Veltar activated the holographic display, showing Earth surrounded by the approaching Galactic Council fleet. "They have detected our approach and are currently coordinating a planetary response. Their leaders are in communication across their various nation-states." Commander Thackrell studied the data with growing interest. "How many separate governmental entities are they managing to coordinate between?" "Approximately 196 separate nations, sir. They appear to have no unified planetary government." Fascinating. Thackrell had never encountered a species advanced enough for interplanetary detection capabilities that still maintained separate tribal governance. What is the nature of their response? Sir, this is where the situation becomes unusual. Veltar hesitated before continuing. Rather than panic or attempts to flee, they appear to be organizing defensive preparations. Takrul's breathing apparatus fluttered with what his species considered amusement. Defensive preparations? Against a Galactic Council fleet? Yes, sir. They are redirecting their military assets, activating early warning systems, and beginning what they call emergency protocols. Their communications suggest they intend to resist. The commander felt the first stirring of unease. In his experience, primitive species either surrendered immediately upon seeing a superior force or fled in terror. The concept of resistance in the face of overwhelming odds was uncommon among civilized species. "Show me their military capabilities," he commanded. The hologram shifted to display Earth's defensive assets. Nuclear weapons, primitive missile systems, chemical projectile weapons, atmospheric aircraft. To Takrul's trained eye, it was laughably inadequate. "Sir," Veltar continued, "there is something else. They appear to be broadcasting." "Broadcasting what?" "A message. Directed into space on multiple frequencies. They seem to believe we might respond to communication attempts." Takrul considered this. "Display their message." The hologram shifted again, showing a middle-aged human male in formal attire standing before a backdrop of Earth. The translation matrix converted his words into clear Vraxian. "To whoever may be approaching our world," the human said, "I am Dr. Antonio Silva, Secretary General of the United Nations. If you are capable of understanding this message, we extend greetings from the people of Earth." Takrul watched with growing amazement as the human continued. "We do not know your intentions, but we hope for peaceful contact between our species. Humanity has always dreamed of meeting other intelligent life, and we would welcome the opportunity for dialogue and mutual understanding." The commander's amusement faded as the human's tone became more serious. "However, if your intentions toward our world are hostile, we want you to understand something about humanity. We are not a perfect species, and our history is marked by conflict and struggle. But we have never surrendered in the face of extinction, and we will not begin now." The human paused, seeming to look directly through the screen at Takrul. "We have survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and countless wars. We have faced the impossible before and found ways to endure. If you come in peace, you will find no species more capable of friendship. If you come as conquerors, you will discover why we have survived everything our universe has thrown at us." The message ended with coordinates for peaceful contact and a repetition of the greeting in multiple human languages. Veltar looked at his commander expectantly. "How should we respond, sir?" Takrul stared at the image of Earth rotating slowly on the display. Something about the human's message troubled him deeply, though he couldn't identify exactly what. "We respond as ordered," he said finally. "Initiate the bombardment sequence as soon as we achieve optimal firing position." But as the fleet continued its approach, Takrul found himself thinking about the human's words. In 30 years of military service, he had never heard a species speak of survival with such casual confidence. Most civilized beings lived comfortable lives, protected by their governments and technology. The concept of enduring ice ages and volcanic eruptions seemed almost barbaric. Yet, something in the human's tone suggested he wasn't boasting or posturing. He was simply stating facts. Back on Earth, the emergency preparations were accelerating beyond anything the planet had ever seen. Every nuclear submarine disappeared beneath the waves, their locations known only to their home governments. Military assets around the globe went dark, implementing communication blackouts and hiding in underground bunkers. But the most significant changes were happening in places the alien observers couldn't see. In a secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Marcus Webb oversaw the emergency activation of Project Artemis, a theoretical defense system that had been designed as a last resort against extinction-level asteroid impacts. The massive electromagnetic railgun arrays had never been tested at full power, but the incoming threat had changed everything. "How long until we can achieve firing solution?" Dr. Webb asked his team of engineers. 36 hours, sir," replied his chief engineer. "The power requirements are enormous, but we're redirecting electricity from 3 nations to make it work. And our chances of actually damaging one of those ships?" The engineer paused. "Unknown, sir. We have no data on their defensive capabilities, but the kinetic energy we can generate should be equivalent to a small nuclear weapon." Dr. Webb nodded grimly. "Better than nothing, continue preparations." Similar scenes were playing out around the globe. Deep space monitoring stations were being hardened against electromagnetic pulse attacks. Emergency food and water supplies were being distributed to underground shelters. Children were being evacuated from major cities, though most governments couldn't explain exactly what they were being evacuated from. In Moscow, General Petrov stood before a massive display showing the locations of every nuclear weapon in the Russian arsenal. Can our ICBMs reach that far into space? His aide consulted a tablet. Not with conventional trajectories, General. But if we modify the flight paths and accept reduced accuracy, we might be able to engage them while they're still outside lunar orbit. Do it. Reprogram every missile we have for maximum range intercept. The same conversation was happening in China, the United States, Britain, France, India, Pakistan, and Israel. 8 nations with nuclear capabilities were modifying their arsenals for a purpose none of them had ever imagined. But perhaps the most important changes were happening in less obvious places. In universities around the world, physics and engineering students were being recruited for emergency projects that their professors couldn't fully explain. Computer programmers were writing software for systems they had never seen. Chemists were synthesizing compounds using formulas that had been theoretical until yesterday. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had started it all with a phone call, was now coordinating a global network of observatories tracking the approaching fleet. Every piece of data about the alien ships was being analyzed, categorized, and distributed to teams around the world. Dr. Vasquez called her assistant. We're getting reports that the objects are beginning to slow down more dramatically. Their deceleration suggests they'll reach Earth orbit in about 55 hours. Elena nodded, her eyes never leaving the screen showing the approaching fleet. Any changes in their formation or behavior? No, ma'am. They're maintaining perfect order and radio silence. Whatever they're planning, they're not talking about it where we can hear them. What Elena couldn't know was that the alien fleet was indeed talking, just not in ways humans could detect. Quantum communication arrays were buzzing with conversations between ship commanders as they reviewed the intelligence reports about their target. These humans are more organized than expected, transmitted Captain Velkov of the second wave. Their response time to our approach has been remarkably swift. Irrelevant, replied Commander Tackrell. Organization cannot compensate for technological disparity. Maintain approach vector and prepare for orbital bombardment. But even as he transmitted the order, Tackrell was reviewing the detailed analysis of human defensive preparations with growing unease. The species below was not behaving like previous targets. Instead of centralizing their leadership for protection, they had dispersed it. Instead of evacuating their population to safe areas, they had moved them to positions that suggested preparation for prolonged resistance. Most troubling of all, their manufacturing facilities were working at emergency levels to produce something. The alien sensors couldn't penetrate deep enough to determine exactly what the humans were building, but the energy signatures suggested massive industrial mobilization. It was almost as if they were preparing for war. Tackrell dismissed the thought immediately. The very idea was absurd. What could a primitive species possibly do against the combined might of a Galactic Council fleet? In 18 hours he would begin to find out. And in the deep bunkers and hidden facilities around Earth, humanity continued doing what it had always done when facing extinction-level threats. They adapted. They prepared. And they refused to give up. The alien fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system with a gravitational signature that registered on every seismic detector on Earth. Commander Tackrell watched through the main view screen as the small blue planet came into visual range, looking deceptively peaceful against the starfield. All vessels report ready status, announced his communications officer. Fleet formation holding steady at optimal bombardment distance. Very well, Tackrell replied, settling into his command chair. Open a channel to the planet. We will give them the opportunity to understand their situation before we proceed. The quantum communication array activated, broadcasting on the same frequencies the humans had used for their message. The translation matrix would convert his words into the dominant languages of the planet below. People of Earth, Tackrell began, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years of military command. I am Commander Tackrell of the Galactic Council Fleet. By unanimous decree of 700 civilized species representing 14 trillion beings, your species has been judged a threat to galactic stability and must be eliminated. On Earth, every radio, television, and communication device that could receive the signal picked up the transmission. In the emergency command center beneath the Pentagon, President Harrison and his advisors listened in stunned silence. You have developed beyond acceptable parameters, the alien voice continued. Your aggressive nature, combined with your technological advancement rate, poses an existential threat to all peaceful civilizations. This is not a negotiation or a warning. This is a final notification. Dr. Sarah Chen looked at the president with wide eyes. Sir, they're literally telling us they're here to commit genocide. The alien commander's voice continued with clinical detachment. You will have one rotation of your planet to evacuate any cultural artifacts or biological samples you wish preserved. After that time, orbital bombardment will commence. Your species will be extinct within one planetary rotation. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in absolute silence. President Harrison was the first to speak. Dr. Chen, what's our defensive status? Sir, Project Artemis will be operational in 14 hours. Our modified nuclear arsenal can reach them, but we don't know if conventional warheads will penetrate their shields. All military assets are at maximum readiness, but honestly, sir, we're throwing rocks at gods. General Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, stepped forward. Mr. Demure. President, I recommend we respond immediately. Let them know we received their message. And say what, General? That we surrender? No, sir. That we refuse. President Harrison stared at the General for a long moment. General, they have the technological capability to cross interstellar space. They clearly possess weapons we can't comprehend. Are you seriously suggesting we fight them? General Morrison's jaw set firmly. Sir, I've served in 3 wars and 17 conflicts. I've seen what happens when good people surrender to overwhelming force. The result is always the same. Those good people die anyway, usually after suffering things worse than death. At least if we fight, we die as humans. President Harrison closed his eyes, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. When he opened them again, his expression had hardened into something that would have looked familiar to every human leader who had ever faced impossible odds. Open a channel, he ordered. Aboard the flagship Unrelenting Judgment, Commander Tackrell was reviewing final bombardment sequences when his communications officer announced an incoming transmission from the planet. From Earth, sir. They're responding to our notification. Put it through, Tackrell ordered, mildly curious about what the humans would say. In his experience, primitive species usually begged for mercy or offered to become slaves in exchange for survival. The face that appeared on his screen was older than the previous human spokesperson, with grey hair and lines around the eyes that suggested long experience with difficult decisions. The human wore formal attire and stood before a backdrop showing the flag of his nation-state. Commander Tackrell, the human began. I am President James Harrison of the United States of America, speaking on behalf of all humanity. We have received your message, and I wanted to respond personally. Tackrell leaned forward slightly, interested despite himself. The human's tone was calm, measured, showing no signs of panic or desperation. You say we pose a threat to galactic stability. President Harrison continued. You may be right. We are an aggressive species, and we do advance quickly when challenged. We have fought wars for resources, territory, ideology, and sometimes for reasons we ourselves didn't fully understand. The human paused, seeming to look directly at Tackrell through the screen. But in all our history, we have never been the aggressors when it came to extinction-level threats. Ice ages didn't attack us first. They simply existed, and we found ways to survive them. Asteroids didn't declare war on us. They were natural disasters that we learned to predict and eventually prevent. Volcanic eruptions didn't choose to target humanity. They were geological events that we endured and overcame. President Harrison's expression hardened. You, Commander Tackrell, are different. You come to our world as judge, jury, and executioner, representing species we have never met, for crimes we have never committed. You speak of our aggression while arriving with a fleet designed to exterminate our entire species. You claim to represent civilization while planning to commit genocide. Tackrell felt an unfamiliar emotion stirring, something that might have been uncertainty. I want you to understand something about humanity, Commander, the President continued. We have never surrendered to extinction, not once, not ever. We have never looked at impossible odds and decided our cause was hopeless. When faced with the choice between survival and death, we have always chosen to fight, even when fighting seemed pointless. The human leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone that somehow managed to be both quiet and commanding. You want to know if we're a threat to galactic stability? Then let me give you an answer that will satisfy your algorithms. Yes, Commander. We are exactly the threat you fear. We are the species that will never stop fighting. We are the species that gets more dangerous when cornered. We are the species that learns from every battle, adapts to every challenge, and refuses to die quietly. President Harrison straightened, his voice returning to formal diplomatic tones. So here is humanity's official response to your ultimatum. No, we will not evacuate our cultural artifacts. We will not surrender our planet. We will not quietly accept extinction at the hands of species who judge us from across the galaxy without ever attempting communication or understanding. The president paused, his next words carrying the weight of 7 billion people behind them. If you want to eliminate humanity, Commander Tarkrel, then you are going to have to fight us for every inch of our world. And I promise you this, by the time you succeed in killing us all, you will understand exactly why the galaxy should fear us, because we will make sure you pay such a price for your victory that every species in your galactic council will think twice before they ever again decide to exterminate a people fighting for their right to exist. The transmission ended. In the command center of the unrelenting judgment, absolute silence reigned for nearly a full minute. Finally, Intelligence Officer Veltar spoke up. Sir, should we interpret that as a refusal to comply? Commander Tarkrel stared at the screen where the human's face had been, his mind wrestling with concepts that didn't fit his understanding of how primitive species were supposed to behave. Yes, he said quietly. I believe we should interpret it exactly that way. Orders, sir? Tarkrel activated his command console, bringing up the bombardment targeting matrix. 300 ships armed with weapons that could crack planets waited for his command. Begin bombardment in 18 hours as scheduled, he ordered. All vessels maintain maximum alert status and activate full defensive shields. Sir. Veltar looked confused. Defensive shields? Against what? Tarkrel looked at his intelligence officer with an expression that would have translated to grim concern in any species. Against whatever humans do when they refuse to die quietly. On Earth, President Harrison's speech was being broadcast on every communication channel on the planet. In homes, offices, military bunkers, and emergency shelters, 7 billion people heard their leader's declaration of defiance. The response was immediate and unprecedented. In New York, manufacturing plants that had been closed for decades roared back to life as emergency legislation suspended every environmental and safety regulation. In Tokyo, engineers worked around the clock to modify civilian satellites for military purposes. In Mumbai, software programmers collaborated on projects that combined artificial intelligence with missile guidance systems. But perhaps the most significant response came from unexpected places. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had discovered the approaching fleet, was now part of a global network of scientists, working on something that would have been impossible just days before. Using the combined resources of every major observatory on Earth, they had created the most powerful deep space sensor array in human history. Dr. Chen, Elena called across the emergency command center that had been established at NORAD. We're getting detailed scans of their ships. Dr. Sarah Chen hurried over to Elena's workstation, where holographic displays showed the alien fleet in unprecedented detail. What are we looking at? Dr. Chen asked. Each ship appears to be approximately 7 kilometers long, Elena explained. They're maintaining perfect formation. But look at this. She highlighted sections of the lead vessel. Energy signatures suggest massive power sources, probably fusion-based but far more advanced than anything we have. Weapons? Definitely. These projections along the hull appear to be energy weapon arrays. But there's something else. Elena zoomed in on specific sections of the ships. They have physical armor, not just energy shields. See these overlapping plates? That's designed to stop kinetic projectiles. Doctor. Chen leaned closer. Are you saying they're expecting us to shoot back? I'm saying they came prepared for a fight, not just a one-sided bombardment. Their ships are built like warships, not executioners' tools. The implications hit both women simultaneously. The aliens hadn't come expecting easy victims, they had come expecting resistance. In military installations around the globe, similar realizations were occurring. The alien fleet's formation was designed for mutual protection and coordinated fire support. Their approach pattern suggested experience with opponents who fought back. General Morrison studied the tactical analysis in the Pentagon's war room. They're not treating this like an extermination. They're treating it like an invasion. What's the difference? Asked Dr. Chen via video link. An extermination assumes your targets can't fight back effectively. An invasion assumes they can, and you plan accordingly. These ships are arranged for battle, not slaughter. President Harrison joined the conversation from the White House Situation Room. General, does that change our options?
Sir, it tells us they expect resistance.
That means they might be vulnerable to tactics they haven't anticipated. A species that builds for battle has weaknesses that can be exploited. What kind of tactics? General Morrison activated a new display showing Earth's defensive assets, but now arranged in patterns that no military textbook had ever described. Unconventional warfare, sir. They're expecting us to fight like a civilized military force. Instead, we're going to fight like what we actually are. Which is survivors, sir. The species that has endured every extinction-level threat our planet could throw at us. We're going to show them what 7 billion apex predators can do when their backs are against the wall. The final 18 hours before the bombardment began passed with frantic preparation on both sides. The alien fleet ran continuous scans of Earth's surface, tracking military movements and energy signatures. What they observed puzzled and concerned the commanders. Instead of concentrating their forces for a decisive battle, the humans had dispersed everything. Military assets disappeared into underground bunkers, underwater bases, and mobile platforms that appeared and vanished from sensors like ghosts. More troubling still, the planet's industrial activity had increased dramatically. Energy consumption was spiking across all continents as humans worked on projects the alien sensors couldn't identify. "Commander," reported Veltar, "we're detecting massive electromagnetic signatures from multiple locations, but we cannot determine their purpose. Weapons?" "Unknown, sir. The power requirements are enormous, but the configurations don't match any known weapon systems." Commander Tackrell studied the sensor data with growing unease. "What are they building?" "Sir, we simply don't know. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." As the final hours counted down, both species prepared for a confrontation that neither fully understood. The aliens expected resistance but believed their technological superiority would ensure quick victory. The humans expected destruction but were determined to make their destroyers pay the highest possible price. Neither side fully grasped what was about to be unleashed. In deep bunkers beneath the Earth's surface, human engineers made final adjustments to weapon systems that had never been tested. In the vacuum of space, alien gunners charged weapons that had never failed to destroy their targets. And in observation posts around the globe, humans like Dr. Frigero, Elena Vasquez monitored equipment that would either save their species or record its final moments. The countdown to humanity's first, and possibly last, interstellar war had begun. But as the alien fleet moved into bombardment position, none of them noticed the subtle changes in Earth's electromagnetic field, or the way certain satellites had begun transmitting signals that shouldn't have existed. Humanity's real surprise was still 17 hours away from activation, and when it came online, the galaxy would discover that there was a very good reason why Earth had produced the only species that refused to surrender to extinction. Some species evolved to be predators. Others evolved to be survivors. Humanity had managed to become both. The first shots of the war came from the alien fleet at exactly 1200 hours Universal Coordinated Time, 18 hours after Commander Tackrell's ultimatum expired. 300 warships opened fire simultaneously, their energy weapons creating brilliant lances of destruction that streaked toward Earth at the speed of light. The target was humanity's space-based infrastructure, satellites, the International Space Station, and the handful of deep space probes that represented the species' first tentative steps toward the stars. To Tackrell's tactical mind, it was the logical opening move: blind the enemy, eliminate their ability to coordinate, then proceed with systematic planetary bombardment. The energy beams reached their targets in 8 minutes and 17 seconds. The International Space Station vaporized in a flash of superheated metal. Communications satellites disintegrated like soap bubbles. Earth's newest space telescope, launched just 6 months earlier, ceased to exist in a burst of gamma radiation. In command centers around the globe, humans watched their orbital assets disappear from tracking screens with grim satisfaction. "Phase 1 complete," reported General Morrison from his bunker beneath the Pentagon. "They're following the predicted pattern exactly." President Harrison, speaking from an undisclosed location deep underground, activated the global communications network that had been prepared for this moment. "All stations, this is Olympus Prime. Execute Prometheus Protocol immediately." Around the planet, responses came back in dozens of languages, but the meaning was universal. Prometheus Protocol activated. Standing by. Commander Tackrell observed the destruction of Earth's orbital infrastructure with professional approval. The human space-based capabilities had been eliminated with textbook precision. Now for the real bombardment. "Status report," he commanded. "All orbital targets destroyed, sir," reported his weapons officer. "No defensive response detected. The planet appears to have no significant space-based weapons." "Excellent. Begin surface bombardment." Priority targets are population centers and military installations. Sir, interrupted Intelligence Officer Veltar, we're detecting unusual energy readings from the planet's surface. Thackrell turned toward the sensor station. Elaborate. Multiple electromagnetic anomalies, sir. High-energy discharges originating from 17 different locations across the planet. The signatures don't match any known human technology. Before Thackrell could respond, his tactical officer announced something that sent chills through every member of the bridge crew. Sir, incoming projectiles detected. Multiple launch points, high velocity. Trajectory suggests kinetic impactors. Impossible, Thackrell breathed. They don't have weapons capable of reaching us at this range. The tactical display updated in real time, showing dozens of objects accelerating toward the fleet at speeds that should have been impossible for human technology. The projectiles weren't following ballistic trajectories, they were under active guidance and continuing to accelerate even after launch. Electromagnetic railguns, announced the ship's computer after analyzing the sensor data. Multiple installations firing sequentially, projectile velocity approaching 0.08, light speed. Thackrell felt his breathing apparatus stutter. Railguns capable of those velocities required power generation on an industrial scale. When had the humans built such weapons? Defensive positions, he barked. All vessels activate maximum shields and begin evasive maneuvers. But the human projectiles had been designed by a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of warfare. They weren't simple kinetic impactors. They were smart weapons, capable of adjusting their trajectories to compensate for target movement. The first impact came against the heavy cruiser Righteous Vengeance. The kinetic projectile, a depleted uranium penetrator moving at 8% of light speed, struck the vessel's primary shield array with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The shields held, but barely. Minor damage to Righteous Vengeance, reported the communications officer. Their shields are at 30% capacity. Thackrell stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Human weapons had actually damaged a Galactic Council warship. It should have been impossible. Sir, called his weapons officer, more projectiles incoming. Estimate 43 separate impactors, multiple approach vectors. On Earth, Dr. Kaya. Elena Vasquez watched the battle unfold from the emergency command center at NORAD. The massive displays showed real-time tracking of both the alien fleet and humanity's defensive response. Project Artemis is performing better than projected, reported the weapons coordinator. 17 railgun installations are operational and firing in sequence. We're achieving 94% hit probability. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her station. What's the effect on their fleet? Minimal damage so far, but we're forcing them to divert power to defensive systems. More importantly, we've proven we can hurt them. Elena felt a surge of fierce pride. The weapons installations hidden in mountains and underground facilities around the globe were humanity's desperate attempt to fight back against impossible odds. Each railgun required the electrical output of a small nation to fire, but they were working. Dr. Vasquez called General Morrison from his command post. What's the fleet's response to our attack? Elena consulted her screens. They're maintaining formation but activating what appear to be enhanced defensive measures. Energy readings suggest they're taking us seriously now. Good. Phase 2, initiate immediately. Around the globe, a new type of weapon came online. While the railguns had been humanity's attempt to match alien technology with brute force, Phase 2 represented something far more dangerous. Human creativity applied to an impossible problem. The first indication Commander Thackrell had of the new threat came from his navigation officer. Sir, we're detecting gravitational anomalies. Multiple point sources. Artificially generated. Gravitational anomalies? That's impossible. Gravity manipulation requires technology levels far beyond. The navigation officer's voice cracked with stress. Sir, the anomalies are affecting our formation. Ships are being pulled off course. Thackrell rushed to the navigation station where the display showed something that challenged his understanding of physics. Localized gravitational fields were appearing and disappearing around his fleet, each one strong enough to affect ships with mass measured in millions of tons. How are they generating artificial gravity wells? He demanded. Unknown, sir. The power requirements should be impossible for their technological level. What Thackrell couldn't know was that humanity had taken a characteristically unconventional approach to the problem of fighting a technologically superior enemy. Unable to match alien weapons directly, human scientists had instead focused on exploiting the one advantage their species possessed: Desperation-driven innovation. Project Sisyphus had been a theoretical exercise just 1 week ago, using coordinated nuclear detonations in precisely calculated patterns to create temporary gravitational distortions in space. It was wildly impractical, monumentally expensive, and completely insane by any reasonable standard. It was also working. Dr. Marcus Webb, director of Project Sisyphus, monitored the operation from a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. Detonation sequence 7 through 12, execute now. Around the globe, missiles that had been launched hours earlier reached their predetermined coordinates in space and detonated simultaneously. Each nuclear warhead had been precisely positioned to create a localized gravitational pulse that would propagate toward the alien fleet. The effect was like dropping stones in a calm pond, except the pond was space-time itself, and the stones were nuclear weapons. Gravitational pulse successful, reported Webb's chief physicist. The alien fleet is experiencing localized spatial distortion. Their formation is breaking up. Aboard the Unrelenting Judgment, chaos reigned as the ship's navigation system struggled to compensate for gravitational fields that appeared and disappeared without warning. Emergency alarms blared as vessels designed for deep space combat found themselves fighting an enemy that was literally reshaping the battlefield around them. Status report, Thackrell shouted over the cacophony. 3 ships have collided due to gravitational displacement, reported his communications officer. The Eternal Harmony is reporting critical damage. The Unwavering Purpose has lost main propulsion. Sir, interrupted the sensor officer, detecting massive energy buildup from Earth's surface. Multiple locations, power levels exceeding our previous measurements. Before Thackrell could respond, the third phase of humanity's defense began. If Project Artemis represented human engineering, and Project Sisyphus represented human innovation, Project Zeus represented something far more dangerous. Human rage channeled through scientific precision. Around the globe, power grids that had been stressed to their breaking points by the railgun operations underwent one final surge. Every nuclear power plant on Earth, every hydroelectric dam, every solar farm and wind turbine fed their output into a coordinated global energy grid that had been assembled in just 18 hours. The target wasn't the alien ships themselves. Humanity had already learned that direct energy weapons were ineffective against alien shields. Instead, the massive energy surge powered something far more insidious. Dr. Lisa Park, project director for Zeus, watched as power levels across 6 continents spiked beyond anything the electrical infrastructure had ever handled. All stations report ready. Target acquisition confirmed. Zeus authorization required. Came President Harrison's voice over the secure channel. Mr. President, Zeus is ready for deployment. Confirm authorization code. Authorization Yankee 77 Alpha Charlie Delta. Execute Zeus protocol. Around the planet, installations that looked like massive radio telescopes suddenly came alive with electromagnetic energy. But instead of listening to the universe, they began broadcasting with power levels that dwarfed anything humanity had ever attempted. The target wasn't physical destruction. It was electronic warfare, on a scale the aliens had never imagined possible. Every ship in the alien fleet suddenly found their communication systems flooded with electromagnetic noise. Navigation computers crashed and rebooted continuously as they were overwhelmed with false data. Targeting systems locked onto phantom signals that appeared and disappeared faster than the computers could process. Most critically, the quantum communication arrays that allowed the fleet to coordinate their attacks began experiencing cascading failures as humanity's electromagnetic assault created interference patterns in subspace itself. "Sir," shouted the communications officer aboard Thackrell's flagship, "we've lost contact with 40% of the fleet. Our communication arrays are being jammed by some kind of electromagnetic weapon." Thackrell stared at the tactical display, which now showed his perfect formation reduced to clusters of ships struggling to maintain contact with each other. The humans had somehow weaponized their entire planet's electrical infrastructure to create an electromagnetic attack of unprecedented scale. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Their technology levels shouldn't support this kind of electronic warfare capability." Intelligence Officer Veltar, working frantically at his station, looked up with an expression of dawning comprehension and fear. "Sir, I don't think they're using advanced technology. I think they're using all of their technology." "Explain." "The electromagnetic signatures suggest they've connected their entire planetary electrical grid into a single coordinated system. Every power source, every transmission array, every piece of electronic equipment on the planet appears to be contributing to this attack." The implications hit Thackrell like a physical blow. "You're saying they've weaponized their entire civilization?"
Sir, it appears they've turned their entire planet into a weapon.
On Earth, the cost of the electromagnetic assault was becoming apparent. Power grids around the globe were operating far beyond their design limits. Electrical infrastructure was burning out faster than it could be replaced. In major cities, rolling blackouts began as civilian power was diverted to maintain the defensive systems. But in bunkers and command centers around the planet, the response from humanity's leaders was unanimous. Continue the attack. Zeus installations are operating at 340% of design capacity, reported Dr. Beginner Park. We're losing equipment faster than we can repair it. How long can we maintain this level of output? Asked General Morrison. Maybe 6 more hours before critical failures cascade through the system. Then we use those 6 hours to hurt them as much as possible. President Harrison's voice came through the communication system with deadly calm. All stations, this is Olympus Prime. The alien fleet is experiencing significant disruption. Initiate Phase 4 immediately. Phase 4 was the most ambitious part of humanity's desperate defense plan. While the other systems had been designed to damage and confuse the alien fleet, Phase 4 was intended to do something far more dangerous. Teach them fear. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still monitoring the battle from NORAD, received the activation signal with a mixture of terror and determination. Phase 4 required her to coordinate humanity's most sensitive surveillance assets in a way that had never been attempted. All observatories, this is Eagle Eye Command, she broadcast on the encrypted scientific network. Initiate Project Medusa immediately. Around the globe, every telescope, every deep space sensor, every radar installation capable of reaching beyond Earth's atmosphere suddenly focused on a single target, the alien fleet itself. But they weren't looking for intelligence about alien capabilities. They were looking for something far more personal. Using the electromagnetic chaos created by Project Zeus as cover, humanity began the most invasive surveillance operation in history. Every piece of electronic equipment aboard the alien ships became a potential entry point as human hackers, working with quantum computers pushed far beyond their design limits, attempted something that should have been impossible. They were trying to hack an interstellar fleet. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A graduate student at MIT who realized that the aliens' quantum communication systems used protocols remarkably similar to theoretical frameworks in human quantum computing research.
I'm seeing data streams, announced Dr. Crossword.
Sarah Chen from her console. We're actually penetrating their information systems. What kind of data? Asked General Morrison. Everything, sir. Ship schematics, personnel records, tactical plans, communication logs. It's like they never considered the possibility that a primitive species might attempt electronic infiltration. On the main display, alien text began appearing, automatically translated by the linguistic analysis programs that had been working on their communications. What the humans found in the alien databases would change everything. Fleet composition reports showed that this wasn't just a punitive expedition, it was the largest military force the Galactic Council had ever assembled. Ship manifests revealed weapons capable of destroying planets, not just eliminating populations. Personnel files showed that the fleet commanders had experience in 17 previous pacification operations against species judged threatening. Most chilling of all, the operational orders were clear. Complete extermination with no possibility of surrender or negotiation. But perhaps the most important discovery was in the psychological profiles of the fleet personnel. The files revealed species that had known peace for millennia, soldiers who had never faced an enemy that fought back effectively, commanders who had never experienced defeat. President Harrison reviewed the intelligence reports with growing realization. General Morrison, do you see what this means? Sir, they're not warriors, General. They're executioners. They've been killing defenseless populations for so long that they've forgotten what it's like to fight an actual war. As if to confirm the President's analysis, new reports began flowing in from the surveillance teams. Sir, reported Dr. Vayu, Chen, we're detecting significant communication traffic between the alien ships. The translation protocols are working, and what we're seeing suggests panic. The intercepted communications painted a picture of an alien fleet in chaos. Ship commanders who had expected a simple bombardment operation were instead facing coordinated resistance from a planet that refused to behave according to their projections. This is Captain Velkoff to Fleet Command, came one intercepted transmission. My ship has sustained damage from primitive kinetic weapons. Request immediate tactical reassessment. Fleet Command to all vessels, came the response from Takral's flagship. Maintain bombardment positions. Do not allow primitive weapons to affect operational parameters. But even as the alien commander tried to maintain order, his fleet was learning something that no Galactic Council species had experienced in millennia, what it felt like to be outmatched by a supposedly inferior enemy. Commander Takrul stood on his bridge, surrounded by displays showing his fleet in disarray, his communications compromised, his tactical situation rapidly deteriorating. In 30 years of military service, he had never faced an enemy like this. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were fighting smart. Every attack had been carefully coordinated to exploit weaknesses in Galactic Council doctrine. They had turned their technological limitations into advantages, using their primitive weapons in ways that alien defenses weren't designed to handle. Most disturbing of all, they showed no signs of giving up. If anything, their resistance was intensifying as the battle continued. "Sir," reported Veltar, "long-range sensors are detecting additional activity on the planet's surface. They appear to be preparing another wave of attacks." Takrul stared at the image of Earth on his main screen. The small blue planet looked as peaceful as ever, but he now understood that appearances could be deceiving. Somewhere beneath those swirling white clouds, 7 billion members of the most dangerous species in the galaxy were preparing for the next phase of a war they refused to lose. For the first time in his military career, Commander Takrul wondered if the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. On Earth, as power grids failed and emergency systems activated around the globe, humanity prepared for the next phase of their desperate gamble. They had hurt the alien fleet, disrupted their coordination, and proven that resistance was possible. Now came the hard part, making the aliens pay such a price for their victory that they would never again underestimate the species that refused to surrender to extinction. The real war was just beginning. 72 hours into what was supposed to be a 6-hour extermination operation, Commander Takrul faced a reality that challenged everything he understood about warfare. His fleet, the most powerful force the Galactic Council had ever assembled, was being systematically dismantled by a species that shouldn't have been capable of meaningful resistance. "Status report," he commanded, though he dreaded the answer. Intelligence Officer Veltar consulted his damaged displays, many of which flickered with interference from the ongoing electromagnetic assault. "Sir, we have lost 47 ships to various human weapon systems. Another 63 vessels report critical damage. Fleet coordination is at 18% of operational capacity." Takrul closed his eyes. "And the humans? Sir, they are adapting." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. In all of Galactic Council military doctrine, there was no protocol for dealing with an enemy that improved its capabilities faster than you could respond to them. The humans had started with crude kinetic weapons and electromagnetic jamming. When the fleet adapted to those threats, the humans had introduced gravitational distortion weapons. When the aliens compensated for spatial anomalies, the humans had begun cyber warfare attacks that penetrated systems designed to be impregnable. Now they were doing something that violated every assumption about primitive civilizations. They were learning from captured alien technology. "Show me the latest intelligence reports," Takrul ordered. The holographic display updated to show Earth's surface, now marked with hundreds of new construction sites that hadn't existed a week ago. The humans were building something with portions of the alien ships they had managed to destroy. "Sir," Veltar reported, "the debris from our damaged vessels is being recovered by human salvage operations. We're detecting energy signatures that suggest they are reverse engineering our technology." "In 72 hours? Takrul's voice cracked with disbelief. "Sir, their rate of technological adaptation appears to be exponential. They're not just copying our systems, they're improving them." As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. "Incoming projectiles," announced the tactical officer. "Multiple launch points, but sir, these aren't the same weapons they've been using." On the tactical display, new contacts appeared, moving toward the fleet at velocities that should have been impossible for human technology. But more disturbing than their speed was their behavior. These projectiles were maneuvering with precision that suggested advanced guidance systems. "Sir," the tactical officer continued, his voice tight with stress, "those weapons are using modified versions of our own targeting algorithms. The first impact came against the cruiser Eternal Vigilance. But instead of the kinetic impact the aliens expected, the weapon detonated in a burst of exotic energy that penetrated shields designed to stop anything in the known galaxy." "How?" Takrul breathed as he watched one of his most powerful warships buckle and break apart. "Sir, they appear to have weaponized our own shield penetration technology. They took the systems from our damaged ships and turned them against us. On Earth, Dr. Cobmare, Elena Vasquez coordinated the most ambitious reverse engineering project in human history from her post at NORAD. The wreckage of alien ships had provided humanity with a crash course in advanced physics that was accelerating their technology by centuries with each passing hour. Status on Project Ouroboros. She called to the team of scientists working around the clock to analyze alien technology. Doctor, James Liu looked up from a holographic display showing alien weapon schematics. We've successfully reverse-engineered their shield penetration systems and integrated them with our railgun technology. But Eleanor, what we're finding in these systems is disturbing. How so? These ships weren't built for war against equals. They're designed for pacification operations against helpless targets. Their defensive systems assume that any enemy weapons will be significantly inferior to their own technology. Elena felt a chill of understanding.
You're saying they've never faced an opponent that could learn from their technology?
Exactly. Their security protocols are designed to prevent primitive species from understanding their systems, not from reverse engineering them.
It's like they've never considered the possibility that their targets might fight back effectively. General Morrison joined the conversation via secure video link. Dr. Vasquez, can we exploit this vulnerability? We already are, General. Project Ouroboros is weaponizing every piece of alien technology we can salvage. But there's something else. We're finding weaknesses in their fleet coordination that suggest an even bigger opportunity. Elena activated a new display showing the alien fleet's communication patterns. They're used to fighting species that either surrender immediately or fight with primitive weapons that can't meaningfully threaten them. Their entire tactical doctrine assumes technological superiority. What happens when that assumption breaks down? They don't have backup plans, sir. When a Galactic Council fleet starts taking significant casualties, their protocols call for retreat and reassessment, not adaptation to continue the fight. President Harrison's voice joined the conference from his secure bunker. Are you suggesting they might withdraw? Sir, I'm suggesting they might be more afraid of us than we are of them. The president absorbed this information with the grim satisfaction of a leader who had bet everything on his species' capacity for stubborn resistance. Dr. Vasquez, how long before we can launch Project Lazarus? Elena consulted her displays, where countdown timers showed the status of humanity's most desperate gambit. 18 hours. Mr. Pei, President. Assuming our manufacturing facilities can maintain current production rates. What's Lazarus? Asked General Morrison. Elena's expression was equal parts determination and terror. Project Lazarus is our attempt to build an entire space fleet using alien technology in less than a week. The implications hit everyone on the conference simultaneously. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was preparing to take the war to the aliens. Sir, Elena continued, if Lazarus works, we'll have spacecraft capable of interstellar travel and weapons that can penetrate Galactic Council shields. But we're using technology we don't fully understand, built with materials we're manufacturing faster than we can test them. What are the odds of success? Asked the president. Unknown, sir. We're in completely uncharted territory. But if it works, the aliens are going to learn something important about humanity, which is, we don't just adapt to threats, Mr. President. We overcome them. Aboard the Unrelenting Judgment, Commander Takrul was receiving reports that challenged his understanding of what was possible. His fleet, designed to exterminate primitive civilizations, was being outmatched by a species that was evolving new capabilities faster than his forces could adapt. Sir, reported his communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It appears to be another message from their leadership. Put it through, Takrul ordered. Curious what the humans would say after 3 days of impossible resistance. The face that appeared on his screen was familiar, President Harrison, but now he looked different. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and there was something in his expression that Takrul recognized from his own mirror. The look of a commander who had seen too much battle in too short a time. Commander Takrul, the human began, I hope you're beginning to understand something about the species you came here to exterminate. Takrul leaned forward, genuinely interested in what the human leader had to say. 72 hours ago, you arrived here with the most powerful fleet in galactic history to eliminate what you considered a primitive threat. You expected easy victory against a species you viewed as technologically inferior and strategically naive. The president paused, his next words carrying the weight of 3 days of desperate warfare. Instead, you've discovered something that your probability engines apparently failed to calculate. You've learned what happens when you corner the one species in the galaxy that has never learned how to surrender. The human's voice hardened with each word. We have taken your technology and made it better. We have turned your own weapons against you. We have shown your crews what it feels like to be outmatched, outfought, and outthought by opponents they were told couldn't threaten them. President Harrison leaned closer to the camera. But Commander, that was just a warm-up. That was us fighting with one hand tied behind our backs because we were still trying to preserve our civilization while defending it. Now you've given us something we've never had before, a common enemy that threatens our entire species. The human smile was predatory. Commander Thackrell, in about 16 hours you're going to learn something that will fundamentally change how the Galactic Council views humanity. You're going to learn what we're capable of when we stop fighting defensively and start fighting to win. The transmission ended. Thackrell stared at the blank screen, a growing sense of dread settling over him. Intelligence analysis of that transmission. What did he mean by fighting to win? Veltar worked at his station for several minutes before looking up with an expression of pure terror. Sir, we've been analyzing their industrial activity over the past 72 hours. We initially assumed they were building more defensive installations. What were they actually building? Ships, sir. They've been building ships. Impossible. Spacecraft construction requires. Sir, they've been using our own technology. The debris from our damaged vessels provided them with materials and designs. They've apparently been reverse engineering faster-than-light drives and weapons systems. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. How many ships? Thackrell asked quietly. Sir, based on the energy signatures and manufacturing output, we estimate between 50 and 80 vessels, all equipped with hybrid human-alien technology. Thackrell felt his legs give out as he collapsed into his command chair. They built a space fleet in 3 days? Sir, they weaponized their entire planet's industrial infrastructure. Every factory, every 3D printer, every manufacturing facility has been converted to warship production. They're building ships faster than some species build ground vehicles. Before Thackrell could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Sir, shouted the sensor officer. Massive energy signatures detected. Multiple contacts emerging from Earth's atmosphere. On the main view screen, pinpricks of light began rising from Earth's surface. Dozens of them, accelerating at rates that suggested drives more advanced than anything in the Galactic Council fleet. Sir. Whis.